All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. Here I am, living on the internet, as always, and I have a guest on the episode this week who is someone who is new to the show and also relatively new to me as far as your music. So I think that the best way to kick things off is if you want to just introduce yourself and give a bit of background about what it is that you do.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Jonas Scott. I go by the artist name Van Allen. Yeah, and I've just been writing some music for a while. And decided to start putting some stuff out again. So
Cool.
yeah.
Well, when did this Van Allen album come out? Because it's pretty recently, right? It's just recently released.
Yeah, I've been just kind of sitting on some tunes. March 12th was the Small Eclipse LP. And then I think it was April 2nd, I dropped another one, which was 8 tracks, Digital Love Thing.
Cool.
And then I just released another one the other day. I didn't really tell many people about that one. It's just some stuff I did way back in the day that was kind of eating at me a bit. I wanted to get it out there. So yeah.
Cool. So is that kind of the mode for this? Is sort of a low key, just sort of release things when you have things vibe?
Yeah, like at this point in time, like it started like that. Like it started with this COVID and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody having downtime. It was kind of like the best time to start doing this kind of thing again. I started getting more gear and getting back into it just with a different approach.
Okay.
And that kind of made me start thinking, maybe this is something I could, invest in a recorder, nothing crazy, but just track some stuff and see if I can, eventually I just decided to mix and master it myself, which I do have a lot of ambition and wanting to work with some of the amazing engineers and mixing and mastering engineers in the city alone too has some amazing people. So yeah, I mean, I do want to work with more people now that it's evolving a little bit more, but it definitely did start pretty chill and still is kind of chill. But there are some new things like physical format talk.
Cool.
I'm a huge vinyl guy, so that's kind of where it led to that direction. So now it's really something that's happening, and I'm
that's awesome.
Super excited.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard to do, right? I mean, everyone kind of aspires to release something on vinyl, but it's just the the time it takes and then the cost and everything. It's prohibitive for a lot of people. So it's very cool that you figured out a way to do that.
Yeah, and working with somebody that is new as well. And I think that's where there's a gentleman out where I'm from here, Gimli, that's starting a record label.
Cool.
Fleece Records. He also owns the pub in town here. Ship and Plow.
Yeah. And they have a lot of good shows there too.
Great Winnipeg acts that come out to Gimli every summer. They're always playing there. So, I mean, he's always had a little bit of a touch into the music scene already. And I think he wanted to, start making some compilations of some local artists and things like that. So now I was able to work with him enough, and Small Eclipse is going to be released on vinyl. We should be having the test pressings back any day now. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's like crazy. It's going to be like a limited edition. Colored vinyl. So yeah, it's really cool.
That's super cool. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of jealous. none of my bands I was ever in ever released anything on vinyl, and it's cool to see that people are still doing it.
Well, that's just it. Like you were saying, like it's one of those things that all of us aspire to. Like now the vinyl's really coming back too, and it's like, wow, to have something on that format is definitely for a smaller independent artist a bonus to think about it. So yeah, definitely.
One of the questions I hate asking people, and everyone hates answering, but I kind of feel like I have to ask it, is how do you define what it is that you do? Because when I first heard it, I think that the response I gave you was that it sounded cosmic to me, which I mean that in the best possible way. But I mean, I feel like it's somewhat hard to pin down because there's parts of it are, psychedelic almost. There's kind of synthy things going on. There's a lot in there, right? So what's the kind of Cole's Notes short version of defining what you do?
Yeah, I mean, that's totally, I think it's just your mindset. You know what I mean? I'm always been the type of person to just be a little bit all over the map.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of where this is. There's elements of my past bands and things I've done over the last decades that are a part of the new thing, but it's definitely like new gear and new technology as that's evolving is forcing some of us artists out of our comfort zones and into these new things. But it's definitely just inspired me to get back into it in general. And I think for me, it's like, I don't know, I'm at the point now where I'm like, I'm trying to like not define it. I'm trying not to define the sound too much and just let all the little elements come out. And I mean, getting back into like formats like vinyl, like I just have so much vinyl I've listened to over the last like 3 or 4 or 5 years that's been a huge influence. Like all these sounds from the past that when you hear something good, it's just like let it go, you know, and just work that into the sound a little bit. So yeah.
Is that maybe an easier way to define it though? It's just like maybe referencing some of the artists that you've listened to that have inspired this project. Is that maybe an easier route?
Yeah, I mean, like that's. I mean, like you say, it's kind of like all over the map, or like it's this cosmic vibe.
Yeah.
Like I think some of the technology that I'm working with, like the drum machines and the loop machines and all these other things, gives like a bit of that spacey vibe, I think. But there is, I haven't really listened to too much of one thing for so long, and that's where these last few years of just sifting through all these different genres, even things I wasn't really listening to before.
Okay.
There's this one band, I could just give it an example.
Sure.
There's this one band, Paris.
Okay.
They were categorized as a glam rock band. But like when you listen to one of their albums, Big Town 2061, by Paris, listen to that album. It's like, or if you can online, but I have the vinyl. And when I found it, I was like, what is this thing? And that's kind of, I think, maybe what you're thinking there. Because it's like, they jump from like the Who, like there's this vibe of the Who, but then there's like this kind of 90s grunge vibe that starts popping in.
Okay.
But then there's elements of you could tell dudes were playing in like these crazy like rock bands in the late 60s. So that kind of came into it as well. So it was like had this like hard rock edge.
Cool.
But I mean, I guess all the other bands at the time were wearing makeup and wearing dresses and getting crazy. So they just slapped them into glam rock. But I guess that's probably what would happen to me in the 21st century. Is just like,
right.
Yeah, somebody would slap a label on me. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know the
But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does a little bit. It's cool, but I mean, obviously, no one's playing shows right now because of the pandemic, and it's affected everyone playing music of any kind. But is this something that once things kind of get back to normal, if they do, that you can do live, or would you need to kind of greatly expand the number of people involved?
See, that's exactly like the approach that I was talking about earlier, like being different this time around. I've limited myself. Like I have a laptop, but no like actual software or anything like that. So everything was just done on a tape machine.
Right on.
And then also I put it through to another Tascam unit that basically writes everything into SD card.
Oh, cool.
So I could bring the files onto a computer and master on a computer, but everything else is really outside the realm of how things have been going lately, and the trend of just kind of sitting behind a computer, especially with the editing portion of things and like mixing, has made it a lot easier to feel like when I compose the songs through these loops with the drum machine, everything running MIDI and synced like that. That was kind of the point, is like I want to be able to replicate this. And so when people hear it live, like for me, I'm notoriously just I get so sick of my own stuff so quickly.
Yeah.
And that's always kind of, I think that's maybe my Achilles heel a little bit, but so in terms of staying on top of that, I made sure that the process in which I wrote these songs, they're all kind of saved in this technology. So in a sense, if it was just me, which I am talking to a couple friends and looking at maybe doing some collaborative sets, So it's kind of like mixing and mashing up our songs and stuff.
Oh, cool.
But other than that, like I designed it so that I can kind of go out there and do a little one-man show thing. So now things are kind of evolving into this two-part set where one's a little more organic with more live instruments.
Yeah.
But also synced to the songs that you've heard on the albums.
Cool.
So, yeah, so that's kind of the plan for once things start getting a little bit more progressive in terms of gigging and shows opening up.
Yeah.
I definitely want to have something that's different from me, but at least give the people what they're hearing, like a good show, and still have that element too. So
totally. Yeah. Do you think the type of stuff you're playing lends itself well to a live performance? I mean, again, I don't keep misusing the word cosmic, but it is the adjective that came up when I was listening to it. And it definitely strikes me as something that could be very entertaining to watch under the right circumstances, maybe.
Yeah, like it has to be, that's the thing. That's why there's elements that I'm adding into the set that are more organic, like looping live drums, like looping a live tom drum, to have a little bit of and then looping my voice in different ways and doing harmonies that way.
Oh, cool.
And then using the tape machine as like a drone instrument.
Cool.
So those three elements as their own thing is kind of a little bit of a nod to that, the things that I'm used to and the things that I remember doing, and having the guitar just kind of be the central thing of what I've been used to my whole life, and ties it all together a little bit. So I know it's cosmic for sure, and I'm almost hearing it because I'm learning the things myself. Like I think that's another way that I write is after a while I start listening back a little bit, and I'm like, okay, I think I know where I'm going with it a little bit more. Like it's not something I even really know what's happening when it's happening, but then through a few little experiments and then starting to see things open up, you're like, okay, I think I could take it this way.
Yeah.
And see where it goes. So yeah, I think the live show will be, reminiscent of the songs, but in a way that it's new. So it's not so just the same thing over and over again kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, I like what you just said about kind of the songs sort of the sound sort of revealing itself as you go along, which I think a lot of people go into playing music or go into a new project with the idea of, this is going to sound like this. This is what kind of band it is. This is what kind of project it is. But I like that yours is kind of just, it's unveiling itself as you kind of progress with it. So, I mean, do you think that what you have now on this record that people are hearing, is there potentially that's going to be completely different, a year down the line, 2 years down the line? Is this sound constantly evolving?
Yeah, like it might be something like that. Like I think that the tools in which I use will always be kind of affecting that. And there's this other part of me that really wants to hearing some of the singer-songwriter stuff that's been coming out lately, like people have just been exploding. Like the talent of like everybody, I don't know, all over the world maybe. Like there's just that backlash, I guess, to all this isolation where you're just seeing so much good material come out. And I'm like, I want to do some more singer-songwriter stuff. I want to do some more just funky stuff, I've always been a blues guy, so I feel like maybe where my strengths are, I'll always kind of be there in some way, whether it's working with somebody else or if it actually is like taking it into another direction. But I've had other projects in the past, and I think maybe that is kind of just who I am. Maybe I am just like the type of person that really gets not tired of a certain thing, but it's just I like to switch it up a little bit and then feel out another sound and see if I can bring it into another thing I'm working into. And
Cool. Well, I think that some of those elements do come into like what I've heard anyway, where it's, it can start off sounding very experimental and then there's a big hook, or then there's, like a very funky part that is very accessible. And then maybe the next track goes into something a little bit more out there. Right. So.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, I think I've always been being a guitar player almost first. It's like, maybe that's like it's almost what's the word? Like it's an awesome thing to have, but it's also like a really difficult thing when you're getting into production. Cause then it's like, I don't want it to be riff rock kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's like, I could take certain things that I normally would do with a tool that I'm used to, and I'll put it into something else where I'll, use the keyboard essentially as anything, like whatever instrument. Like I have this MC707 that kind of turns 8 different tracks into whatever synth sound you want.
Oh, cool.
Or instrument. So that kind of like makes this, opens this keyboard up, and that's kind of where I gravitated to. I haven't really touched the guitar for a long time, so I feel like that's why the music has really been sparse guitar. Whereas that other part of me that just wants to riff everything kind of chilled out a little bit. So yeah, there's definitely like I think it's those moments in some of the songs that can take away a little bit from those other songs that I think us artists put on albums to try and feature another song, or like complement another song, or in this way, like conceptualize from point A to point B, because like Small Eclipse was really like a point A to point B planned out. I took about 3 months with that one to really, with an artist and like working with all this different art. So yeah, like there is some kind of direction. It is my mind that just kind of is all over the place. I think that if people follow me, I think it could be a thing, but it has to be like constantly evolving with a certain type of theme, I think. And that's where like Van Allen and the name and the whole idea kind of comes from. Approaching it not so much as myself as like somebody who's just trying to act as a sponge and take a little bit of everything in. And I want to, collaborate with other artists too in different genres. So I think that this is kind of like a good way to put out some music that people from all different kind of walks of life with music can, maybe hear something that they're like, yo, that's pretty cool. So yeah. We'll see how that kind of goes too.
Good way of looking at it for sure. So you just mentioned, the idea of that album being kind of point A to point B. How does what you do fit in with the way that, unfortunately, well, in my opinion anyway, most people listen to music these days, which is listening to things piecemeal, right? I mean, you're not going to, I wish you could, but you can't expect people to necessarily listen to a record from, track 1 to track 10 and not take any breaks, right? It's so... Do you care about that, or does that bother you when you're putting something together that someone's maybe going to take track 5 and listen to a minute and a half of it rather than experiencing the whole project?
Absolutely. Like, I mean, but like any artist, like once you start to get to the certain level, like you start to see, like if you're writing better content, you're getting better, you get to this level where you're like, it's gone. Like it's no longer, the best thing that you did, and now it's like going to be judged by everybody, and like if it's a personal thing to you, then yeah, absolutely. I take it a little bit to heart, but at the same time, I've learned a long time ago to kind of let that part go, because I learned like once you release something, you have to be willing to just say, like, I'm going to play it 1,000 times over, and I'll hate it by the end of it. But as long as everybody else kind of got their fill out of it. And so with that mentality, I approach it and don't get so offended. You know what I mean? Like I wish things were kind of a little bit more conceptualized and thought out when it comes to the theme of an album or something like that. But yeah, I mean, we have these options. It's like, oh, pick the song that you think everybody else will like, to be the feature on your Spotify list or on this thing or on that thing. And so yeah, it kind of forces you to think that way, like everything's all about just like 30 seconds, and is it good within 30 seconds? If not, next. So but it doesn't really affect me enough to want to stop what I'm doing. I think that's why I'm not like super go-getter, want to go get signed to this thing and do all these crazy things. Like I do want to, take it seriously, but I think because of that alone, I just want to do what I want to do. You know what I mean? Like, and so that's going to definitely maybe affect some of the listeners, but I think even just now, that's how you build the followers that you're starting to build. Is like these people are like, yo, this guy, does think about it from point A to point B, and I can listen to the album from here to there. And if I'm listening, maybe I can hear the story. I think the vinyl is going to help with that too. With small.
I was going to say, that the people who are buying the vinyl are going to be people who are most likely to sit down and just take in the whole thing as one piece.
Absolutely, right? And like the artwork, like I worked with this fantastic artist. I grew up with this guy, Anthony Nelson. He's amazing artist, and he did 5 amazing pieces. And to have one on the cover, that's cool. But like that's another thing about the internet, just shows the cover.
Totally.
And you know what I mean? And like, so some of the things, like I've added some bonus features on Bandcamp now, like with the actual like full art download if you buy the album and everything like that. But the vinyl, it's going to be that physical, tangible, like pull. There's going to be some album artwork when you pull it out too. So it's like, it's got to fold out. So like I think that kind of experience will bring people back to the idea of like, oh yeah, this is like how music kind of evolved and was at a certain time, Yeah.
Well, not as you're outside of the city, right? Do you feel a level of detachment from the local music community, or do you think that in the age of the internet and everyone being connected anyway, that you are kind of, it's not an issue? And detachment doesn't necessarily mean bad either. Detachment could be a good thing, right? I mean,
like I mean, for me being out here, it's not so hard for me to think of it that way because it's like a home vibe, right?
Yeah.
Gimli, but yeah, like developing friendships in the city and working with different artists, and I've worked with other people outside of Manitoba and done my thing back in the day when I was younger, and so like you're reminiscent of all that, but I think part of you wants that isolation. That's why you're kind of there in the first place. But yeah, there is a downfall to that, and that's kind of been that collaborative vibe of like starting to really apply myself a little bit more, and then feel like there's not really much in the digital world for me, like in terms of that. I'm not so great with computers and all those kind of things. So I mean, I'm learning how all these things are working and how all this stuff's working in terms of like I'm seeing artists putting out virtual shows and doing all these things, and I'm not quite in that scene. So in that respect, absolutely, it's kind of like it'll be good to like start making more connections. But I did self-detached, I think, for various reasons. But I got a bunch of children, and I think another thing for me was like alcohol was a big deal as well, was for me anyways. That was like something that evolved over time, and I think every artist knows how that whole thing goes. And if you can kind of conquer it, that's a great thing. But maybe it does take a little bit of isolation and things like that, and like finding out how you're going to approach it and how you're going to do it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this too, is like coming out of a little bit of that, and like being in a sober state of mind and always feeling that way, and makes you feel like I'm determined just as much as everyone else. But I do have that feeling of like, the scene is what the scene is, and like I have to be respectful of who I was. Maybe like there is parts of the scene that would remember me even as like somebody who I'm evolving to not be. And those are the kind of things that I think, and I mean, music scenes are just notorious for that, because like especially in a city like Winnipeg, it's like there's so much going on. It's such a small city,
it's so incestuous. Everyone's been in each other's bands. Everyone knows each other.
Exactly. That's totally it. Like, and so, I mean, nothing really carries on for too long before you start to feel like it's either me or this whole thing, and I have to either, like, I got to either figure out my thing. So I think approaching it now in a better state of mind will make it easier to kind of feel good in the scene, and it be more about the music and not so much about the scene, I guess, or like the venues and the, I remember like being in it from such a young age. Like I started actually playing shows like when we were like 13, 14, and then getting into clubs and things like that when we were like 16, 17. So like alcohol was always just like this thing.
Totally.
That like you knew, like once you got to a certain age, it was like they're holding it back from you, but then boom, like it's people on the inside being like, yo, come on.
As soon as you don't have a stamp on your hand anymore, you're good. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Like no one's gonna bust you. It's all good. And then so it became this thing of like payment as well. And that's something I'm really like not. That's something I've always had like a really bad thing with, and especially lately, like, so the idea of playing pubs and stuff like that, I've always had a bad experience. Now being in that the state of mind, thinking that like that's how, you know, I got paid like that for a long time.
Yeah.
Like just booze and you know, alcohol or whatever it is. And it's like, you start to realize like, wow, I'm not even taking myself seriously with this thing, you know, and that's,
well, no one else is either, right? If they know they can pay you with that, they're not. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you're definitely in a state of mind that it's like, it wasn't even about music anymore. Like, or some of the bands I was playing with, like really awesome people, talented people. And then you're just going to shows basically to just do your thing. You're not there for like the music anymore. So yeah, there's been some like really nice perspective changes that make me feel like approaching the scene, and it being about the music kind of wholeheartedly now is a big step forward. Yeah.
Well, what, I mean, just to go back a bit, what bands may people recognize you from? Because I mean, you know, like you said, you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. Like when I was much younger, and that was another thing, like being in a Gimli band, that's when you felt the separation at like 13.
Sure.
Like we started a high school band, and there was a couple bands, you know, and like things were not so hype though, you know, it just wasn't like Winnipeg. Like you could be a high school band in Winnipeg and be playing shows like every weekend.
I was doing that. And I was in high school band. We were playing the Albert and stuff. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I mean. Like, and I mean, I remember like eventually we started getting like with a booking agent, and we were still young enough to be in high school. So like, I remember meeting dudes like you, and like it was dudes like you kind of brought us in, and we're like, yo, this is cool. Like a band we haven't really seen every weekend, you know, too. So we
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. Like our first show with a band called Stranger was like the high school band. Okay. But like the first dudes to let us open for them was like the Perpetrators.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Like I can't remember what it was called at the time. If it was Joe's Garage or whatever.
Oh yeah, that thing has had so many names. Yeah.
But it was so long ago. But I remember that so vividly because it was like, wow, finally like some bands that you heard on the radio and like some dudes that you really respected were like, hey, this is cool. Some young kids just like making noise in Gimli. That's cool. But that evolved into like, so knowing a lot of people already by the time I was out of high school and getting into Winnipeg, and then moved out and played with a few dudes. They became a band called Wild Sun. I was playing like in Toronto with them in the Toronto area.
Okay.
But then they moved out west. And during that time, I made a transition. I had my daughter around that time. This was about a decade ago.
Okay.
So I stayed closer to home, but was still active. I met Micah Ehrenberg at that time, around that time. So worked with Micah on a few different things. Like he was, I think when we met, he was doing his solo stuff. It was like the Zappa stuff. Okay. Which is like kind of some of his like earlier stuff in general, but was just like blown away.
Yeah, he's a great songwriter.
Yeah, and this was like when he was probably like, I don't even know, 16, maybe 7. Like he was still a high school kid too. So I remember
he's still not even all that old, really, right? Like
I know he's still young. He's probably only like what, 25 or 6,
something like that. Yeah.
But yeah, he's always been somebody that right from the get-go, I remember thinking, wow, like it's really nice to see somebody, you know, especially like his age, diving deep into some of that singer-songwriter stuff. And he had a respect for it at the same time that I met him at that time. It was like, wow, it was like, you know, a lot of stuff. So working with him on quite a bit of different things, like his solo stuff. We've done our own little things over time. We kind of picked away with some dudes in the basement on what eventually became like Trio Telfair.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of something that has always been like an ongoing dudes in the scene that I've always played with would always be somewhere there. But it was kind of like a really cool core at the beginning of people. Yeah. And yeah, like we released, I think it was Little Red Express, and we did some stuff on Micah's tape machine. And that was kind of like the beginning of like, let's just, like, we're always in this basement. Like, let's just a buddy had my buddy Corey there had a Tascam, one of those little handheld, and it gets a decent sound. And
Yeah.
eventually it kind of evolved into like getting a better sound. And so everything was just live off the floor. And that's just always been like that's my comfort zone. Like if I could just do Trio Telfair every show, that would kind of be like what I'd want to do.
Okay.
But I think where this is kind of evolving is like the elements of Trio Telfair for a live set. So like the live set having more of that kind of like spur of the moment, letting things kind of just happen and see what happens.
Like a musical stream of consciousness kind of?
Yeah, and like you notice people's reactions. Like it's really weird. We've played some shows where it was like we played like really small little shows, and then we started playing like randomly like bigger shows, and then like I don't know how or why, like I was like kind of like blown away when the buddies were like, yo, they want to book us at this thing, they want to book us at that thing, like playing at the Forks, and then that Human Rights Museum show.
Yeah, the Jazz Fest thing, eh?
Yeah, that was a huge deal.
Yeah.
So like the people that were taking Trio Telfair seriously, I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. Like this would be something I'd like to do, you know, now that I'm in like a really nice state of mind.
Yeah.
You know, kind of as a side project, it would be nice to really start up something like that again and get that like full force. Cause that was kind of just like us in the basement doing our thing.
Yeah.
Which is cool, but like keeping that premise of like everything being made up, you start to see the crowd, like something happens. And then all of a sudden, if you react to that, it's like you could just drive the whole show in an interesting way. So some of those bigger shows where you started having more people in the audience, that's where things started getting a little nutty. So some of the live recordings and stuff like that are really cool because they're just like, you could tell people are like slowing down, and then the music starts chilling out, and then there's like one person in the audience who's like wanting it to just, it's not on their level yet, and then so they start picking it up and we start picking it up, and then eventually it's like a totally different place. And it's like you could do that with just like no structure, just completely like allowing things to just happen. And that's like where music's the best for sure.
That seems the kind of thing that would feed off of an audience too, if it's the right kind of audience, right? If the crowd's into it, that's definitely going to inform the direction the music takes and the energy level and the passion and stuff in it, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Like you start looking at each other and you're like, wow, that's nutty. Like you start to feel it, and that's kind of what I think we're starting to go for. Was like, if it's us in the basement, that's really cool. But like when we start being around people, this thing becomes like a whole other beast. Like some of the shows were really intense, and like when the more of us in the set too, if there was like 5 or 6 of us, like some of the shows at whatever it was called at that time too, but now it's like the Handsome Daughter, I guess.
Things had like 5 names in the past 15 years.
I'm just gonna call it HD now.
Yeah.
The HD. But I remember some sets there too, like because those are ones you're just like not feeling any pressure, and it's just like to do what you're doing already is kind of like a lot of, you start to feel a little bit of pressure when you're like, there's no set list. People are looking at you like where's this going, yo? Like,
yeah.
And then all of a sudden something crazy happens and everyone's like, oh, whoa, this is nuts. And that's where you could really, that's when you got everybody in and you could just drive it home. It's just awesome. Yeah.
To skip ahead back to the Van Allen stuff, where can people find the records you've done recently?
So everything, I've made it available. I've been working through DistroKid to just get things out to all those streaming platforms. So Spotify, you can find me, Van Allen, just search Van Allen, Small Eclipse, or Digital Love Thing, or Terravosis M is the new album that just came out. It's like a 5-track EP. And then iTunes, you can buy it, like Apple Music and that whole way. Same thing, search Van Allen. You can stream everything on YouTube, which is pretty convenient. Cool. So yeah, Van Allen Fan Club on YouTube. And then I'm setting up all the albums on Bandcamp again. I had an account from a while ago that I'm just gonna start popping my albums onto and making that the Van Allen Bandcamp page. So that's the VA fan club at bandcamp.com.
Cool. And then if people want to find out more about what you're doing as far as, maybe following up and finding out when the vinyl comes out, or if things change when you're playing a show, what's the best way to stay in touch with you that way?
I guess following my Instagram is one of the best ways, because it's just, I guess, the way that everybody's doing things these days.
Totally. Yeah.
So Wild Style. So that's WY.LD_style. That's where you could find me basically on Instagram. But yeah, I just started that kind of thing. Like, you could see a little bit more of like what the live set's evolving into there. Videos that I'm making that I'm just kind of doing more consistently. Some of those, yeah. And so, that's the main place I'd say to just kind of check things out. And then you can check my website link from there to go to all the other streaming sites. So, yeah.
Awesome.